Welcome from my humble second bedroom here in the Saucon Valley, part of the Lehigh Valley Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, part of these United States for now anyway. Western Hemisphere, North American continent on this planet Earth. The only one we have, third rock from the sun in the Terran solar system, part of the Milky Way galaxy. This is TKE tonight for the 22nd of October, 2024. From the Associated Press. This article is written by Mr. Nicholas Riccardi, staff writer for the Associated Press. Headline: More Republicans are voting early, helping break records. Nearly 19 million ballots cast so far. With former President Donald Trump's encouragement, Republicans are voting early again, flocking to the polls for in-person voting ahead of Election Day and helping push the national number to nearly 19 million. The early turnout is breaking records in swing states such as Georgia and North Carolina. The GOP hopes this surge of early votes will fix a mechanical problem that some in the party blame for costing it the 2020 presidential election and key races in 2022. Campaigns usually want their voters to cast ballots ahead of Election Day so they can focus their resources on getting more marginal supporters to the polls at the last minute. Republicans excelled at that before Trump turned against early in-person and mail voting in 2020, as he spun wild conspiracies about the process and convinced his supporters to wait until Election Day to cast their ballots. But the party is again pushing its voters to cast their ballots early, and the former president is largely encouraging the change. I'm telling everyone to vote early, Trump said on a podcast last week hosted by conservative Dan Benigno, who has widely spread false information about early voting and the 2020 election. Republicans seem to be responding. In Nevada, where Democrats for decades relied on a robust early vote to counter the GOP on Election Day, about 6,000 more Republicans than Democrats had actually cast their ballots this year as of Tuesday, according to the Associated Press's research. It's unclear what this means for the election, however. The early vote data only reveals whether votes are registered with a party, not who they are voting for. And the early electorate can change from day to day as more people vote early. The surge in 2020 Democratic early voting was largely a reaction to a pandemic that no longer exists, skewing historic comparisons. And what might seem like demographic trends in the early vote can suddenly disappear once Election Day votes are factored in. Dateline Beirut. Sarah El-Deeb, Farnoosh Amiri, and Tia Goldenberg are the triple authors of the following article from the Associated Press dated today. Dateline Beirut. Israel said Tuesday that one of its airstrikes outside Beirut earlier this month killed a Hezbollah official widely expected to replace the militant group's longtime leader, who was killed by an Israeli strike last month. There was no immediate confirmation from Hezbollah about the fate of Hashim Safadini, a powerful cleric who was expected to succeed Hassan Nasrallah, one of the group's founders. Safadine, or Dini, I honestly don't know how to say it, was killed in early October in a strike that also killed 25 other Hezbollah leaders, according to Israel, whose airstrikes in southern Lebanon in recent months have killed many of Hezbollah's top leaders, leaving the group in disarray. Last week, Israel killed the top leader of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, during a battle in Gaza. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Tuesday during a trip to Israel that leaders there should, quote-unquote, capitalize on Sinwar's death as an opportunity to end the war in Gaza and secure release of hostages taken as part of the deadly Hamas attack that started the war. Blinken also stressed the need for Israel to do more to help increase the flow of humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office called his meeting with Blinken, which lasted more than 2 hours, friendly and productive. We've talked on the program an awful lot. Mr. Netanyahu does not want peace. He does not want an end to this war. This war is keeping him out of jail. It is making him money. It's keeping him in power. And I don't think it's any more complicated than that. The goals that Israel set out was to decapitate, figuratively or literally, however you want to take it, the leadership organization structure of both Hamas and Hezbollah. It has done that. And yet it continues to choose the path of war. As we have said on the program a million times, Israel has every right in the world to defend itself. Every right. Every right. It does not have the right to indiscriminately slaughter, which is what it has been doing. Mr. Netanyahu, the parallels between Mr. Netanyahu and Mr. Trump are inescapable. They are inarguable. Cannot be denied. Mr. Trump is running for president to stay out of jail and to make money. And because he got a taste of ultimate power and wants to extend that power even further. Mr. Netanyahu has been in power for decades. He first became prime minister when President Clinton was in office. He has become fabulously wealthy. His wealth incalculable. No one can exactly pinpoint what he's worth. Continuing this war keeps him in power. It means he can delay court cases, he can delay parliamentary elections. And the money just keeps flowing in. I think we have to realize as a species on this planet that war has become quite the business. It is profitable. The death, destruction, the life-changing experiences, the PTSD, the trauma, the family separations, all of it that comes with it has become secondary to the pure profit of it, the pure power of it. Israel has every justification to stop now by the goals it itself set. But they won't, because one man wants to keep getting richer and richer and richer and wants to stay in power. Dateline Washington by Colleen Long and Zeke Miller. Harris says she's ready if Trump tries to prematurely declare victory. Isn't worried about sexism. Vice President Kamala Harris said Tuesday that her team is prepared to challenge Donald Trump if he tries to prematurely declare victory in the 2024 election. But she's first focused on beating the Republican nominee. Harris spoke to NBC News just 2 weeks before Election Day as part of a media blitz meant to deliver her closing argument before as many persuadable voters as possible. She said she was not concerned about the role sexism could play in the election, as she stands to be the first woman elected to the White House and again defended President Joe Biden's fitness for office. Harris said the Democrats, quote, have the resources and the expertise, unquote, should Trump try to subvert the election. Quote, this is a person, Donald Trump, who tried to undo a free and fair election, who still denies the will of the people, who incited a violent mob to attack the United States Capitol, and some 140 law enforcement officers were attacked. Some were killed. This is a very serious matter. she said. Trump has been criminally charged with trying to overturn the 2020 election and refuses to admit he lost to President Joe Biden. After a failed legal effort to overturn the results, a mob of Trump supporters rioted at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, attacking law enforcement officers in an effort to stop the certification of the race. Speaking to supporters Tuesday, Trump criticized Harris for spending the day conducting interviews, appearing to try to show distrust in the election. She knows something that we don't, he said. I think she knows some kind of result we don't. From the Associated Press by Jeff Mulvihill. No, sorry, Mulvihill. I said that wrong. Apologies. Mulvihill. Jeff Mulvihill. So, sir, if you're listening, apologies for mispronouncing your name. I think it's the least that I can do as a sign of respect to the people's work that I'm trying to highlight, bring to you as an audience. The least I can do is say their names right, so when I really screw it up, it bothers me. And I hope that, anyway. Women in states with bans are getting abortions at similar rates as under Roe, a report has found. Again, this is an article by Jeff Mulvihill. Women living in states with abortion bans obtained the procedure in the second half of 2023 at about the same rate as before the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, according to a report released on Tuesday. Women did so by traveling out of state or by having prescription abortion pills mailed to them, according to the We Count report from the Society of Family Planning, which advocates for abortion access. They increasingly used telehealth, the report found, as medical providers in states with laws intended to protect. Well, that's written wrong, isn't it? Boy, that's grammatically wrong. I just found a grammar error. Oh, shocker. Sorry. They increasingly use telehealth, the report found, as medical providers in states with laws intended to protect them from prosecution, and other states used online appointments to prescribe abortion pills. Abortion patterns have shifted. The We Count report began surveying abortion providers across the country monthly just before Roe was overturned, creating a snapshot of abortion trends. In some states, a portion of the data is estimated. The effort makes data public with less than a 6-month lag, giving a picture of trends far faster than the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, whose most recent annual report covers abortion in 2021. I believe that's Randall that wants to call. You know you can. I'm taking the rather angry criticism I received last night for my conduct of my own program to heart. No opening theme song, very little commentary. Here's the news. You choose which one you like. Oh, of course, the insults against my own family. Right? But that's okay. Show's yours. Go ahead.
Yeah, Jeff. First off, thank you for putting on the other side information my late post to get in. But I only got that video from Bo Betts just like an hour ago, and as I'm going through my feed, it was up there at the top, and it was like half an hour ago. The report by the Atlantic of this new information on Trump's not only disdain for active military service people, not only is disdain for veterans and for anybody that lost their life, but some of the things in there are just they just grab my heart in pain. Like him saying to the generals, Milley, etc., and other witnesses that are coming out now, so, he said in 2020 that they're coming out now and saying about his comments, that I like Hitler's generals, and the article, Milley tried to explain to Trump. They weren't all, they weren't all for him. There was 3 attempts, by German generals to assassinate him, and one of the biggest general in one of the attempts was the Panzer King. In the North African campaign, to Mussolini's failure in North Africa against the then allies before we entered the war. But what he came out and said about the active service woman who was killed, was murdered, was raped, men murdered. He flat out lied to the family. Flat out lied. He said, I will pay for the funeral. Well, they wanted the funeral. They wanted her buried in Arlington, which she is buried in, because she was active duty. But they wanted her funeral, Spanish American family in Texas. They wanted her funeral in Texas. And the whole city shut down for a day for the funeral. And it costs a lot of money to transport a body down there. Military doesn't cover that, and transport it back, et cetera, et cetera. And so they submitted the bill to the Pentagon for $60,000. And Trump had the audacity to say, who the F is paying $60,000 for a Mexican woman's burial? And yet all these Latinos here in PA and in Cuba, Cuba, all the Cuban Latinos in Florida, they're flocking to him.
Cubans have hated the Democrats since Kennedy because of the bad pig.
He is so racist. I just can't. I don't understand these people. I just don't understand them. Jeff, go ahead.
Cubans have hated Democrats since Kennedy. They blame him for the bad pigs. They blame him for not.
Yeah, I know that.
Being able to take care of Castro. I'll play devil's advocate to you, though. I was very significantly rattled and bothered by a lot of the comments that came on last night's phone call. I took them very, very personally. And I think, I do think it's probably time to strongly consider, depending on the outcome of this election cycle, to end what it is that we do. Because I don't think that it matters much, sadly. But let me play devil's advocate with last night's phone call in mind, and the depth of the criticism that was laid out. With all of that in mind, let me play devil's advocate. At least 47% of the country doesn't give a shit what you think. They don't give a shit that he's racist. They love him because he's racist. He's made it okay to hate the people that these irredeemables have always hated. He's made it okay. I understand that you're upset about it. I'm upset about it. I think it's narrow minded. I think it's racist. I think it takes us back to a pre Civil War type of society. But at the end of the day, this is who we are. I think this is who we are. And that's part of the scary part of it. It's not the only scary part of it, but it's part of it. You'll hear people ask, are we really this racist? Is this who we are? Are we so triggered and so easily led by a would-be dictator? Are we so willing to throw our freedoms away based on the lies that we'll someday be billionaires like him and that he hates all the same people that we hate? Is that really who we are? The answer is probably yes. The answer is probably yes. It's probably yes. And I don't know what I'm not certain of. I think the only place that there might be room for discussion is that the majority, or is it a very well-armed, very militant, very angry, very ready to kill, and very willing to be subjugated by a dictator vocal minority? One thing that some of the very cutting and I think borderline personal criticism that was laid at me last night is that I'm too pessimistic and I'm not sunshine enough. All right, so I'll give you some sunshine. To hear Liz Cheney and the scores of Republicans that traveled with Vice President Harris throughout the day yesterday, and to hear Liz Cheney sit, much to the vice president's credit, by the way, not behind her, not as some sort of prop, but sit right up at the front of the stage, right along with her as equals. And to be able to sit there with a straight face, in fact, usually with a smile, and head nodding and shaking and agreeing, as Liz Cheney could tell the audience, I don't agree with her on many, many policies and issues. But I do believe that the American experiment should continue. And the only way that happens is if she's elected president. I think that's a very, very extraordinary thing. I think it's very powerful, and I think it's very positive. I think it's something that we should be proud of. If you don't want to be proud of Liz Cheney specifically, because you may have your problems with her throughout the years or the Cheney family, yeah, I could live with that. But these are extraordinary campaign events. Charlie Dent, Christy Whitman, Adam Kinzinger, some of the generals that you mentioned. God, John Bolton was too extreme for the George W. Bush administration. It's not exactly center. But the fact that these folks have been willing to go out publicly, travel the nation, raise money, put ads on the air, buy billboards, make signs, and say, look, we don't agree with her on everything. We don't. But we do believe in democracy. And there's only one presidential candidate who's going to preserve it. Period. So there's your bit of sunshine. But to play devil's advocate, I'll ask you, because I think the more you talk tonight, the better. Because I'm going to really struggle to make it now. I'm going to struggle to be here the rest of the cycle. And I'm very much going to struggle to be here after the cycle is over. But I'll ask you. You are legitimately upset. This is America, at least for now. We'll see how much longer it is. You can feel any way about Trump that you wish. So my question to you is not to necessarily to disagree, and certainly not to put down your point of view. I'm just asking a question. Is this who we are? Is Trump really who we are? Because I think he might be. And why do you think that nearly half the country, that the more vile he becomes, the more racist he becomes, the more, well, if he's breathing, he's lying, that. But the more that he lies, the more they love him. What's wrong with us? Or is there anything wrong with us? Who the hell are we?
Let's go back to Mussolini and let's go back to Hitler. Let's go back to Stalin. All of these dictatorial people, whether it's under fascism with Mussolini or Nazism under Hitler or communism, socialism under Stalin, they all followed what Goebbels, what Hitler's propaganda minister said. You tell a lie enough times and people will believe the lie.
Well, he got it from Mussolini. Remember, the fascist takeover started in the 1920s, before the Great Depression. Actually, it started in Italy. Hitler learned a lot from Mussolini. He learned a lot from Mussolini. And Nazism and fascism are really the same thing. It was just a different name, different country. Remember what fascism actually is. And I don't mean to. I'm not saying this directly at Randall to remember, because he knows this. But let me be kind enough to stop for a second and remind you all what fascism is. Mussolini created fascism in a manner of, or modern day fascism, really. There was actually a form of it going back to the Roman Empire, but the modern day fascist movement really began with Mussolini, and it was his own definition. He originally called it corporatism, and actually began his quote-unquote political movement as the corporatists. And he realized very quickly that people were pushing back against that. They didn't like the idea of corporations running their lives. But when he rebranded, to use a modern word, when he rebranded as fascism, people didn't really know what fascism was. They didn't know it was the same thing. What Mussolini did when he would have been prime minister. He later called himself emperor because, Rome is in Italy. It doesn't everybody want to be an emperor. But that said, he became prime minister. His party took over the majority of seats in parliament. He then dissolved parliament and named all the new members of parliament. What he did was he kept the existing parliamentary districts. Think of them as congressional districts here in the States. But rather than have elections for them, he took the largest business owner and or richest person in each parliamentary district and made them the parliament, with the promises that he would run the nation. They didn't really have to do much work. They would get paid handsomely. And that's exactly what happened. So they ruled Italy for their own benefit. So how did Mussolini keep the people happy? He did what most dictators do. He delivered basic services. That might sound crazy. That might sound almost, well, isn't that what government's supposed to do? It is what government's supposed to do. He delivered basic services. The schools continued to run. The roads continued to be clean. Garbage was picked up. Water systems worked. But he also did what most dictators do. The other. And he began massive military expenditures and buildups and invaded another country. He thought they would take North Africa, especially since it was right across the Mediterranean. It would make it very easy. Except that his military wasn't very good. And they never really did conquer a whole hell of a lot of North Africa. They took control of it, but they were constantly fighting to keep it. And that's a very brief history of it. And there's a lot of holes in there, and there's a lot of gray. If you were drawing a picture, or if I'm trying to draw you a verbal picture, there's a lot of shading, if you will, that doesn't take place in there. Nazism was really no different Hitler delivered basic services. He helped pull, you don't want to hear it, but he helped pull Germany out of the Republican Great Depression that had, at that point, then spread worldwide. He made Germans feel good about themselves again. And how did he do that? Massive military expenditures, conquering territories, and
massive civil
and the other.
massive.
Yeah, massive. Believe it or not, yeah, massive infrastructure spending.
The Autobahn is what General Eisenhower, when he became president, saw the military advantage in a national crisis of being able to transport goods and being able to transport troops quickly. And that's why we have the interstate system, because he saw in Germany this incredible system of roads.
It's also
and
why
that put people to work from the Great Republican Depression.
It's also why the interstate highway system, if the federal government is going to pay or contribute funds to the building of a new interstate or rehabbing an interstate or something along those lines, I think it's every 10 miles. And it might be less than that. It might be like 3 miles. That there has to be a perfectly straight patch of road that is at least, oh no, maybe it's a straight bit of road that has to be 3 miles. My dad taught me this when I was a kid. So my numbers are all over the place, and I understand that. And you can yell at me, Google me and yell at me and correct me, as you can always do, by the way. There has to be, and Randall will know this, there has to be perfectly straight, every so many miles, there has to be a perfectly straight stretch of that interstate. No overpasses, nothing too close to it on either side, and it must be perfectly straight. So it can be used as an airstrip by the military if necessary. But I'm getting off topic. I'm asking you, I want to ask you, so why, if we on our side of the aisle see these things as being so repulsive and yet so obvious, right? We look at our Republican brothers and sisters and say, how do you not see this? Well, then I'm asking you to put yourself in their shoes for a second. How do they not see this? Or do they see it and they love it because it's who they are? You tell me. I'm asking.
It's because the early billionaire family, the Waltons, that own Walmart, for example, it's because of trickle-down economic theory, which is the biggest friggin' lie the Republican Party has ever invented. But getting back to the Waltons, they want to compete against the biggies. They want to compete against somebody that was just as big as them, if not bigger at that time, Kmart. They want to compete against the biggies. Sears and Roebuck, Pennies. How are we going to compete? We're going to sell cheaper products. How are we going to sell cheaper products? Well, first, like New England, Philadelphia, and through the 70s, was one of the biggest textile and clothing manufacturers areas in the country. But it was unionized. Well, hey, Ship and Shore, which is out of business now, you've got to move down to a southern state like North Carolina, where they will pay less wage. We can pay less wages via your factory, or we're not going to buy from you. And they did. And all this industry, it all went south. And after 10 years, what happened? Well, we're paying too much to you. You've got to move your factories to Asia, specifically China at that time. And yes, all these corporations did, because they didn't want to lose. being in Walmart. And Sears and Penny's tried to do the same thing, and Kmart tried to do the same thing. And all it did was destroy industry in this country, the industrial Midwest, the industries in Pennsylvania here, and leave communities across a wide stretch of New England and the Mid-Atlantic states and the Midwest, just leave them with no income. They're then thriving Main Street businesses, because most towns just have a main street and then side streets for houses. If you've ever really grown up or gone through and talked to people in rural towns and communities, including upstate PA, yeah, between the utter lie of trickle down theory and between the lies that I will bring back, Trump can't bring back industry like with a snap of a finger. It takes years and years and years to build factories, to hire qualified workers.
The United States lost more factories and manufacturing jobs during the Trump regime. They have gained them back during the Biden administration.
Absolutely. What I'm saying is, he's going to start tariffs. Well, you know history, Jeff. The beginning cannon shot that led to the Great Republican Depression was us, USA, imposing tariffs on Europe. And then it was Europe imposing tariffs on us. And as businesses output had to slow down and people began to be laid off because nobody's buying, and the same thing in Europe. That was the first shot, tariffs. And then it got even worse. Germany, it wasn't just, I'm trying to think what Wilson and the Allies, what the treaty was imposed on the losers.
The Treaty of Versailles.
Germany, Austria, Empire, and Turkey. The Ottoman Empire. I can't remember what the treaty was, but it was so, I'm at a loss for words. I'm looking for. It was so devastating to the people. I mean, if you know what happened after first the armistice and then the surrender of the Kaiser after World War I, 1918, 1919 was what was called the Spartan Wars. And it was a war between two extreme sides. All these veterans came back from the front lines. They had all their small weapons. They had their rifles. They had their submachine, their machine guns. It was a war between those that believed in communism and those that were right wing and believed in authoritarianism. Hitler fought on the right side after he came back. But the Spartacus Wars, and meanwhile, the weak Weimar Republic, it was a republic at that time, of Germany. They were incompetent to handle war, essentially war 50% between their people in the streets with guns and mortars and machine guns. Is that what we're going to? Is that what we're going to? Is my question to you.
I don't know if we're going there, but I know that there's a significant part of the population that hopes that we are, which is even worse. which makes it even scarier. But there's a significant part of the population that wishes we were, and that wants that. In the same way that there's a Zionist movement inside Israel, and they're trying to bring about the end of days and the coming of the Messiah by reclaiming the Al-Aqsa Mosque and rebuilding Solomon's Temple, there is an armed faction or factions, these self-prescribed or self-described, self-proclaimed militia here in this country that are willing to bring about the same thing. They think they can take the blue states by killing everybody in them. And Trump's not discouraging them. And neither is Musk, and neither is Peter Thiel, or neither is anybody, because disarray, chaos is good for business. It's really good for business.
It's good for some businesses.
It's good for billionaires. It's good for billionaires.
Yeah, it's good for billionaires. They've got the fortresses or their plan to have live in an island or something. Yeah. Anyway, lost my train of thought. I had a really good one and I lost. I'm trying to remember. Anyway, yeah, Mussolini, because he was Italian, was obsessed with the Roman Empire, not the Roman Republic, the Roman Empire. Yes, he wanted to be an emperor, and he called himself that, yes. And fascism did begin in ancient Rome. It began not during the Republic. It began when the Republic turned and got their first emperor and became a empire. And that's exactly when the rich, the landowners that had the slaves, that's exactly when they said, we're not going to pay taxes. And hundreds of years later, when the Roman Empire is almost bankrupt from having to defend the frontiers against the, quote, barbarians, unquote, or defend what they conquered against native populations that said, we want our country back. They said, we don't want to pay for this. We're not going to pay for this. And the emperors, what did they do? Well, they kind of gave up on the civil improvements, and they didn't finance correctly their armies, and made the majority, the early part of the Roman Empire, most legionnaires were foreigners. They were not Italian citizens. How do you gain Italian citizenship? You serve 20 years in a Roman legion, and then you get a pension, and you're a citizen. Our country's policy at one time was any foreign immigrants to this country that served in our military, and they served honorably, they not only could become a citizen, they could bring family members in this country as legal immigrants to become citizens. And Trump, during his administration, there's at least 400 Americans by that original policy. They should be absolutely Americans. They were all kicked across the border to Mexico by Trump. There's a whole little small American contingent down there that never learned Spanish. Well, I'm sure they learned it now after all these years, but it's just buku. You know what I mean? And as far as last night, I am so proud of you, Jeff.
No reason for that.
I am so proud of you for standing up for your ideals.
And it shouldn't be hard. I guess that's the problem. And let's remember,
No,
let's keep in mind that, that anybody's allowed to feel the way they feel about it. Nobody has to agree with me. That's for damn sure. A lot smarter people on this planet than me.
I should have private messenger last night and say, God bless you, brother.
I'm a big boy. I'm a big boy, and like I said, let's be very fair about it. Nobody in the world has to agree with me. Probably better off if you don't. But nobody has to agree with me. Perfectly okay. It's just sometimes it gets to you. Sometimes it gets under the skin a little bit. It hurts. But that's all right. I mean, I put myself out there as a public figure, and I've gotten death threats, and I've gotten, I get vile messages lots of times. I mean, we had the Twitch stalker last night who didn't say a single true thing, and that's okay. That happens. It's the climate that we're in. Perhaps I should be better at. It's
not just. It's not just now.
Go ahead. You're breaking up a little bit, just a tiny bit. You're breaking up just a tiny bit.
It's not just now. It's not just now. I'm trying to think. Let's see. I ran for township auditor in 77. Lost. I ran for school board in 79. I lost. I ran for school board again in 81. I lost. And then I ran. Okay. Then I ran. '81 for township commissioner. I lost. I didn't run again for public office until 91. And I admit, people, Republicans, Democrats back then, at least where I lived, down in Aston Township, Delaware County, PA, there was not this animosity, there was not this hate, there was not this BS. When I won my first election as a Democrat, because the ratios in Delaware County were changing. When I started in politics, it was 3 Republicans to every Democrat. And by the 90s, it was 2 Republicans to every 1.5 Democrat. When I first finally got elected for public office. Of course, I ran in I ran in 98 against the Republican Speaker of the House here in Delaware County. So I only got the 33.5% vote. Yeah. But then it hit the 20th century. And things were changing here in Delaware County. People were moving out from Philadelphia because they wanted suburban life, or they wanted a better school system, or whatever reason. They wanted close to their job at Boeing helicopter plant. People were moving out, and the ratio was changing, and it was 1-to-1. Republican to Democrat. And then after Bush, there are more registered Democrats in Delaware County. And what I've seen I've got a lot of Republican friends because we moved to Middletown Township, which was just a enclave of traditional Republicanism, upper middle class. We were at the bottom of the economic barrel, but that's okay. We just wanted to get a better school system for our daughters. I started meeting people, greeting them at the polls and the primaries and the general. Going out talking to people in my precinct. And yes, at least that time, most Democrats and most Republicans had the same common wants. And it was after Trump got elected in 2016. I noticed this big change with what I call the moderate Republicans. Yeah, they're going to call them rhinos. Well, guess what? That was what was here for like ever. Moderate Republicans. And I saw these people changing. Like, this guy's nuts. This guy's a racist. This guy's anti-Semitic. This guy, this guy's anti-woman. And that's the biggie. I've got a friend up in Middletown today. Yes, she's won every election every 4 years. And the Republican Party endorses her. And now the Democratic Party endorses her. But she is registered independent because she does not want to be associated with the Trump MAGA party. Go ahead.
No, I got nothing. I just got one more article I want to get to before we sign off. That's all. Some good news, actually. So I want to thank you for sharing so much. Your kind words, of course, are always appreciated. They're not always necessary. I'm a big boy. But I'd like to think maybe, well, I can get into this after I hang up because my arm is going to fall off. Hold this phone up. But you just take care of yourself. I'm going to get to one more story, and then let's do it all again tomorrow. Sound fair?
Yeah, sounds fair, man. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good night.
Love you.
Thank you, my friend.
I hope George and Christine and
yeah, George is doing what George does at an extraordinary level. I think many of us could learn from it. He again is over at his mother-in-law's helping fix things around the house and doing things that she can't afford to do otherwise. He's an extraordinary family man. He really is. There's a lot. He's as good a man as you're ever going to find in any way, shape, or form.
That's the number one thing to me that's most important. It's family, religion, community, and morals. And I'll let you go. I love you, Bob.
It's supposed to be what the society's built on. Thank you, mate. One more story before we sign off, and that is from the Associated Press. It is written by Dave Collins. I got an easy name. No wonder I'm reading this stuff. But it is, helps. Rudy Giuliani ordered to turn over New York City apartment 26 watches to Georgia election workers. The Biden Department of Justice, which I know is a Trump line, Merrick Garland's Department of Justice, has been at best, the best word I could use for it is fickle and maybe timid in its prosecutions of the out-and-out crimes of the Trump regime by Trump himself and many of his underlings. It has taken civil cases on way too many occasions to get anything done and to hold anyone to account. Well, Mr. Giuliani's been held to account. As we continue to wait for Trump to be held to account, and judges that he appointed saving his ass at every turn, which is exactly why they were appointed. There has been some accountability. And Giuliani has suffered a lot of it, very deservedly so. So we go to the article, again from the Associated Press. The author is Dave Collins. Rudy Giuliani must turn over sports memorabilia and other prized possessions to two Georgia election workers who won a $148 million defamation judgment against him, including his New York City apartment, more than 24 luxury watches, and a 1980 Mercedes, one once owned by movie star Lauren Bacall, a judge ruled today. But U.S. District Judge Louis Lindman in Manhattan also said Giuliani does not have to give the election workers the three New York Yankees World Series rings or his Florida condominium for now, noting that those assets are tied up in other litigation. The property Giuliani must relinquish is expected to fetch several $1 million for Ruby Freeman and her daughter, Wandrea Moss. Shay Moss, I think is how most people know her. They won the $148 million judgment over Giuliani's false ballot fraud claims against them related to the 2020 presidential election. They said Giuliani pushed Donald Trump's lies about the election being stolen, which led to death threats that made them fear for their lives. Under Tuesday's order, Giuliani must relinquish within 7 days his Manhattan apartment, estimated at more than $5 million, as well as his interest in about $2 million that he says Trump's 2020 presidential campaign owes him. Trump doesn't pay anybody. How do rich people keep their money? They invest it, they grow it, they start businesses and make more money, or they cut expenditures, which means you hire people to do a job, you don't pay them. Very much like it. Billionaires are very much like insurance companies. The premiums come in so you can get covered against eventualities, and then you never get paid when those eventualities happen. Trump's the same way. The Fifth Avenue Trump Tower, there are union workers, hundreds of them, who've never been paid a dime for their work building that building. Gee, what a shock. Giuliani himself, a man who literally destroyed his entire legacy and his entire future, and that of his family, because his son has turned into quite the cartoon character of a joke as well. He threw it all away to defend Trump because he thought he was in the inner circle. He thought he could make a buck from it. And Trump didn't pay him either. And he's lost everything. And he deserves to have lost everything. That's all we got for tonight. For everybody at GCPR, for everybody that surrounds our program, and of course to April Riddick. I'm Jeff Kennedy. That's all the damage we can do for tonight. How'd you like the new format? Let's talk about it tomorrow. Have a great night. See you then. T. Nathan from 11, Thomas at 8 in the morning. See you tomorrow at 8.